Do, 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 do. Welcome to another episode of Unleashing the Future of Work, a live online podcast. Happy Monday to everyone that's viewing. I really do wish I had enough of the technical proficiency to actually have my own theme song since I've been doing this for so long and so consistently now. But today, I want to introduce you to our amazing guest who's going to be on today's episode with me. He's a rock star technology leader. I mean, he's working with one of the top tech companies in the world right now, I believe, and who is building the productivity platform, not just app or AI assistant, but I believe platform that's going to change the world in a few years. So Ammon leads the growth organization, including sales, marketing, and customer success. He is a veteran of multiple early stage startups, agencies, and notable tech companies such as Google, Yodel, and OMD. And most recently, he ran customer acquisition efforts for Frame.io. Ammon brings 15 plus years of experience in technology, marketing, and growth hacking. And literally, he's a growth leader. And I actually use the product that he works on, X.AI, which is probably one of my favorite products like within my technology stack. And I think any enterprise would love to use it as well. But more importantly, I'm going to have Ammon talk to us a little bit about his background, how he got to doing the work that he does as a growth leader and VP of growth for X.AI. But more importantly, where does he see the future going in terms of SaaS productivity platforms as well as AI assistants? So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Ammon to the show. What's up, man?
Hey, Tim. How you doing, man? Good to be here.
Dude, how are you doing today, man?
I'm great. I'm kicked back in a rocking chair. It's sunny outside. Couldn't be better.
Where are you currently located?
I am in upstate New York. I fled the city about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, man, dude. I know it's been really tough in New York with everything going on.
Yeah, it was some interesting days there for a little while.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about how long have you been living in New York and just working in tech and doing the stuff that you do, man?
I moved to New York City in August of 2001, which historically speaking is not great timing. So it was a little bit rough getting started there, but I ended up working with a couple of small startups, and then I worked a job at Google. And honestly, having 2004 Google on your resume opens up a lot of doors.
Yeah.
I ended up with a few other early stage startups, some ad agencies. So I've done a lot of work in a lot of different corners, a couple of startups of my own as well.
Yeah. So talk to me, man, because you're to me, man, you're an entrepreneur that's also like a serial entrepreneur, man, because you've done so many awesome things and you've had such a dynamic background. So I want you to talk to me about what led you to working with Google, which is still arguably one of the top companies in the world right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, the way I ended up at Google was sort of circuitous. I worked I was the fourth person at a small startup that was doing essentially Google AdSense before AdSense existed.
Yeah.
And so just by happenstance, having bumbled my way into that job for a couple of years, when I talked to a friend at Google, he said, "Oh yeah, that's relevant experience." And I went. So, sort of managing to get relevant experience elsewhere helped me segue into that position. So I mean, it wasn't through any moxie on my part. It was really just luck.
Dude, that's crazy. So I want to show love to our amazing audience that is tuning in from all around the world. Man, please show love to me and Ammon. If you are interested in talking and asking him any questions, we are more than happy to answer your questions and show you some love and shout you out from wherever you're tuning in from. Okay. Yeah. So show us some love in the comments.
I shared it with literally tens of followers.
Dude, you're hilarious, man. You're hilarious. So, let me ask you, you right now you're working, in growth. But, I want to ask you, what do you think, are the successful skills for a growth leader?
You broke up there for a second. You said successful skills for a leader?
Yeah, no, for a growth leader. So for someone that wants to work in growth, what do you think are the essential skills they need?
I think probably the most essential skill is just the ability to improvise, is the ability to be fluid with your strategies, because there's no playbook that's applicable across every company out there. You really have to apply your product and your knowledge and your team and the resources that you have, and find a direction. It's a lot of trial and error. When people talk about growth experimentation, they're really talking about trial and error. You're just trying to figure out what works in your situation, because every situation is different. There's certain concepts and tools that can be applied, but for the most part, you just have to be open to failing quickly and succeeding thoroughly.
Yeah. For you, when did you realize that, man, I actually have a really great skill, or I have a really great expertise that can be applied to this field? Because you haven't been doing growth your entire life. You've worked in a variety of different positions.
Well, so first of all, I still don't call it imposter syndrome, but I still don't feel like I'm all that skilled or all that much of an expert.
Yeah,
but I am. So I think that just I solved a lot of problems along the way, whether it was my own startup, whether it was an analytics dashboard for someone, just figuring out different new ways to do it. And, each time that you, for instance, learn a new skill like SQL because you have to, because it's applicable to the job that you're doing at the time, that becomes one of the arrows in your quiver that you can pull out at your next job. And now and so it's sort of an additive thing based on what's required of any given position that you start building these skill sets over time. I'm not the kind of person that can sit down and watch a video course and come out of it with a skill. I have to have it applied throughout. So everything I know, I learned from Google and Stack Overflow.
All right. A true engineer.
Well, I've been described as, my work has been described as high-end hacky. So shout out to my friends here for coining the phrase.
I love that, man. So I love that you say this, because I think a lot of people don't realize that skills are developed through trial and error, right? Through failure, right? And I think you, particularly being, someone that's literally, you're one of the top growth experts that I know. I follow your work, and more importantly, X.AI has benefited from your amazingness. For let me ask you, man, what do you when you first kind of got into technology and started doing the work that you're doing? I mean, you failed a few times. What was that thing that kept motivating you to kind of just like keep going, keep learning?
It's fun to see results.
Yeah.
It's fun to be able to tie, oh, I did this thing and it had this impact, even if it's just small. If you build something small and you see a handful of people start using this little trigger or device or call to action or whatever it is you might have, you go, oh wow, that's really cool. And that kind of keeps you going when you can see the impact that you're having in a very direct way. And that's actually one of the reasons that I prefer working for smaller startups. For anywhere from 10 to 50 people is kind of my wheelhouse, because there you can have a direct impact on the overall company's directions. Anything bigger than that, you start, your efforts are part of a larger team's efforts that are moving the larger company's metrics, but it's not as directly tied to exactly what you're doing, and so that kind of keeps me running. You have a couple of failures, but you learn from every single failure. You pick up new skills.
And what I think you're touching on too is like this power of working in a results-oriented environment, right? When you're a startup, it's all a matter of what are the outcomes, what are the results early on, and people can tangibly see that. And what's so funny about what you said, I think, is the fact that as you grow into a bigger enterprise, it's more harder to tie the results to the individual, because it's more about the collective whole. For you, what are a few tips? Because you work with one of the top remote companies in the world. What are a few tips for successfully working in a results-oriented environment?
It's sort of twofold. One is you want to keep your eye on the prize. Like, you want to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish here, and tie everything that you're doing back to some of those things. But then also just being creative and having that. So I'm not saying I necessarily am creative, but being open to creative ideas. Whether in some cases it may not seem like me building this little high five at the end of scheduling a meeting is going to move the needle much for my primary KPI, but there's certain small things that you can underestimate the impact of that can have outsized results. So you want to maintain your focus on the KPIs, but you also want to be open to crazy ideas.
Yeah. The delighters, right?
Yeah, the Easter egg, little Scooby Snack.
Dude, I love that. I love that. And I think you mentioned the value of one being open minded as a leader and really valuing creativity. So let me show love to our amazing commenters. Toby just said being open to creative ideas. Love that. Runak is asking me where did I get my equipment from. I will make sure I comment where soon, Runak. Shout out to you. Please show us some love and let us know where are you tuning in from. Nigeria, UK, Texas. Let us know, Oakland. No matter where you're tuning in from, we want to show you some love. So, I want to talk to you a little bit about, what's in your productivity stack. I know X.AI is in there, but what else?
I would just add that I got my equipment free with an iPhone. It's relatively lo-fi compared to your setup over there. My personal productivity stack, I use Zapier a lot. Like anyone who knows me knows that I just try to automate absolutely everything using back-end processes. I'm not opposed to writing my own bespoke little script that runs and does something in the background for me. If it weren't for good calendaring and good iPhone reminders, my life would probably be a bit of a dumpster fire. So I rely on those quite a bit. I'm a little bit old school when it comes to note taking. I just fire up old TextEdit on my Mac and just write down notes, and then I come in and knock them back down. But I sort of centralize my work life around my calendar. It's full of little reminders. It's full of to-do lists in the notes description. And that, I guess, makes sense for someone who's in the calendar business. I was headed that way prior. I do rely on Slack quite a bit. I rely on Google Docs quite a bit because those are very useful, especially for inter-office communication.
Yeah, that's true. So Slack, Zapier, and X.AI.
Yeah, I mean, if
Google Calendar.
Yeah, I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to technology. If I find something that works well, I'm going to stick with it.
Yeah.
That's my personal technology stack. As far as my work technology stack, it's just a series of probably 60 tabs that are open at all times. I do not practice good tab hygiene.
Dude, I love that. So RJ is saying, there are a ton of creative graduates entering the field right now. How do we differentiate ourselves from the wave of people that are facing unemployment following this crisis? Do you have any thoughts on that, man? Because I think this is like where this comes in is being able to like say, okay, what are we going to be open to in terms of creative like jobs and opportunities, and where can you learn real quickly, right?
Yeah. So especially when it comes to creative fields, and my previous company, I worked for a company called Frame.io that does video collaboration tools. And we hired a phenomenal motion graphics designer, and we hired her largely on the strength of just her work, her body of work. And she had really she'd been putting out some of her work on her Twitter feed. She reached out to a couple of people, she networked, and all of this was done virtually because she was based in Alabama. But I think that she was a very good, Abby, I'm going to name drop her, Abby was a very good, a very good case study in how to get your foot in the door with a company or with a job like that, because your work will speak for itself, but it also has to get noticed. And so the ability, she worked through one of her mentors, and she reached out to some of the people at our company and just, said, hey, check out my work. And she would mention us on Twitter, and eventually we took notice and we hired her. So it does take a bit of hustle, but I don't like using the term build your personal brand, because that makes you personally feel impersonal, but that's sort of what it is. Like you kind of have to build a reputation, even if you don't have one. And, I don't feel like anyone's special, but I'm here being interviewed, so I guess I have some sort of personal brand.
I love that you said that, man, because I think so many people often when they hear build your personal brand, man, it's scary to some people, man. Like it literally freaks some people out because a lot of people just don't know what their value proposition is, right? And I think it just comes back to you and I, right? Like, let's talk about marketing here. Is like, how can you create value, right? Or how do you even support? I think a lot of people just don't know how to communicate that. And especially, in times like this, now it's the time where you have to really create clarity on what does make you special, right?
Yeah.
Because, any company is looking for you to come in, support them, and add value in some way because they want you to feel fulfilled and they need your help. But if you can't communicate that, who's going to be able to help you?
Well, I have another anecdote. Another friend of mine graduated law school, and he was saying, well, I need to figure something out. I think I'll become a gaming attorney. And I said, well, what do you know about being a gaming attorney? And he said, very little.
Yeah.
But positioned himself as a gaming attorney, and he studied up on as much as he could about the law around IP and all those sorts of things. And he put himself out there to go speak at small conferences and gaming conferences, and he built a name for himself, not having really known anything about it. But in the process, he learned so much about it that he became the preeminent expert. And so now he has a very healthy practice as a gaming attorney, just because one day he decided to call himself that and then grow into the title, which he did.
Wow.
I think it's highly applicable to a lot of disciplines where, it's not even fake it till you make it. It's more like give yourself the title and then grow into the job.
and literally and just follow through with it, right? Because so he essentially kind of created the category, his own category, and followed through on what his category stood for.
Yeah. And if you say that that's what you want to be and that's who you are, then other people don't know any better. And so, if you're confident that you can figure it out as you go along, then you'll do exactly that. I feel like the majority of my career has been figuring it out as I go along, and I've managed just fine.
And you know what's hilarious? RJ said, I've heard of that guy. He's huge in the gaming community. So he actually knows who you're talking about.
His initials wouldn't be CR, would they?
Are his initials CR, RJ? That is hilarious.
Might be.
Wow.
Might be the same guy.
Maybe the same guy. So, for you, and let's go into, talking a little bit more about X.AI, right?
Sure.
Because X.AI has done something similar in a sense, in terms of you all have created, you all have owned a category in terms of AI scheduling assistants, and you guys are now doing some really cool things in terms of building a scheduling network for the people on the platform. I want you to talk a little bit about, how did you find out about X.AI? What was your journey into getting the company before we dive deep on the product?
Well, X.AI has been around for 6 years, a little over 6 years now.
Wow.
I joined close to a year and a half ago now. I had a friend that worked there who I trusted and respected. And I said, well, talk to me about this. And they happened to be looking for someone similar to my profile at the time. And so it just, one thing led to another.
Yeah.
They swiped right and I swiped right, and the rest is history. But, X.AI, it started off with a lofty goal of essentially replacing the personal assistant.
Yeah.
And I think that over the years, we sort of distilled that into, well, we're not trying to replace the personal assistant. We're trying to be a scheduling assistant. Yeah. And that doesn't have to be humanistic. It doesn't have to be anthropomorphic.
Yeah.
I stumble over that word every single time. It's just a matter of being efficient. Are we going to get that meeting on your calendar as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible? And we don't care if that's using our AI to just say, here's the meeting I want with Tim, or whether that's sending Tim a calendar link, or whether that's just saying, meet with Tim, and it just happens because we both are connected to the network. We've become a little bit more agnostic as to how we do the meeting scheduling, and much more focused on doing it efficiently.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful. So instead of it being some sort of, it's not necessarily about the human component. It's more so about the efficiency component. How can we help you do that as quickly as possible?
Yeah, exactly. And the AI is really cool. And quite frankly, I use it more often than any other means of scheduling meetings. But that doesn't necessarily suit every use case. You don't want to send multiple people the email with the AI CC'd and have them do all the follow-up. Sometimes it's just easier to go, hey, Tim, grab time on my calendar. And you go, cool, click, done. And so we really accommodate a lot of different ways that people go about managing their time.
Wow, dude, that's so powerful. So Edward says he's a big fan of X.AI. He uses it and he wish he didn't have to jump off because he loves hearing you speak about the vision and the mission. You
Well,
know,
ping me,
so
Edward. I'm happy to geek out about
Edward, make sure you ping him. All right.
it.
So now with what's going on, right, due to COVID-19 and how most organizations have gone completely remote, man. How do you think they should be thinking about productivity and and leveraging SaaS platforms like X.AI?
Uh, Good question, because a SaaS platform, you really become much more dependent on the technology that ties you together than you would otherwise, around the proverbial physical water cooler, right? So
Mm,
I think that people's relationships with software, like what we're using right now, is going to change substantially. There's no more much of a stigma against a video call. I think that people are going to be relying on traditional phone calls much less, and conference calls much less, because people
mm,
are getting exposed to video conferencing technology. And I think that there's going to become much more of a reliance on asynchronous tools such as Slack, even email, and Google Docs, and those sorts of things, where I can do a little bit of work and ask you a question and not expect an answer for 20 minutes to an hour because you might be busy. And it's a little bit of a shift in how people think about work, in that
mm.
I don't need to pull you aside and us have a face-to-face conversation to hash it out. We can have the exact same conversation over Slack over the period of an hour and a half, and it's just as productive.
Mm.
Uh, and there's a paper trail. Oh, pixel trail. Pixel trail. There we go. I just coined that. I'm sure someone else already did. I'm claiming it.
That's true. So you see a lot of companies probably experimenting and exploring on what is our productivity stack look like for our fully remote workforce, and what are companies or products that we can invest in.
Yeah. And I think a lot of companies are trying a bunch of things out.
Mm,
We've seen teams with X.AI who are using WebEx to schedule meetings, or using Zoom, they're using
yeah.
Google Hangouts, or using Microsoft Teams, and it's all the same team doing this. I think that they're just trying to get their footing and figure out which tools are going to serve our team the best. Which ones
Yeah.
are going to make the most sense for us. Because a lot of companies haven't had the luxury that X.AI did, which is we went remote a year and a half ago, and so we blundered our way into a pretty solid remote workflow over time. A lot of companies right now, they didn't have that luxury. They got thrust into
Yeah.
a remote setting all of a sudden, and they had to figure it out very quickly. And so,
Yeah.
again, back to that whole trial and error thing that's going on right now with companies figuring out the remote work
I
situation.
know, and I love that you're mentioning this, Ammon, because it's the reality is that remote work is different, and for us at Guy, we've been fully remote since the onset. My co-founder Taman and I mean, we met in Seattle when we started the company, but the reality is that now that because we're always moving, we're always traveling, whether it be talking with customers or I'm actually currently with my parents right now. Like we've realized that remote work is good for us. One, because it saves us expense as a startup, right?
Mhm.
Like we don't have to pay more money for an office, but also because it challenges us to be very clear in terms of alignment. And
Yeah.
so it's like it's a positive challenge though too. But as we're building the culture, what we've also realized is that there's specific things that you have to really implement at an early stages within a remote culture that will allow it to be successful. Right. And one of it being really like this commitment to community and holding everyone accountable for deadlines and things like that. What are your thoughts on that, man?
I think a lot of it is about appropriate expectations.
Mm,
I don't expect you to be online on Slack from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day.
yeah. Yeah.
That's part of the part of the nice thing about working from home is that you're not just at work, you're also at home. But part of the problem with working from home is that you're not home, you're also at work.
It's a what, catch 22.
Yeah, exactly. People would always say, "Oh, that's great, you work from home." I'm like, no, it's not great. I never leave work. you know? I guess that's the glass half full dichotomy.
Yeah.
But I think that setting realistic expectations for how people manage their time, setting realistic expectations for when people work, and just communication, and over communication. At X.AI, we have certain overlap hours that are from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. On weekdays, Eastern Standard Time. And these overlap hours are basically, you're expected to be largely available. If someone asks you a question on Slack, you should be at least somewhat available.
Yeah.
And we can have meetings during that time. That doesn't mean you only work 4 hours a day. It just means that the rest of the time you might be doing work asynchronously. Like I'll be online at 9 p.m. sometimes because that's the only few moments of quiet I have to actually focus. But what you soon realize is that you can start putting in an 8+ hour day, just not all contiguously. You're breaking it up into little chunks throughout the day because you've also got, screaming kids running around. You've also got, the mail needs to be picked up and whatever else.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those mental shifts that happen. And in our company, if somebody says, hey, I'm going to be offline for an hour, I got a quick doctor's appointment, or I got to take care of something, there's zero stigma attached to that. It's not like you're shirking your responsibilities. You're still going to get done everything that you committed to getting done at the beginning of the week. It's just you're not going to get it done right in this hour. You're going to get it done when you get a chance.
That's powerful, man. Hold on, let me get my charger before my desktop dies. Give me a moment.
Yeah, no problem. I guess this is the part where I should sing a song to the audience so that keep everyone entertained. Do, 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 do. We'll be right back. Do, 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 do. Don't tell Tim I was singing.
And we're back.
Right.
I love that you mentioned that, because that's having a very clear hours of operation in place too, right? Like, just because you're a fully remote team or organization doesn't mean you still don't have hours of operation. And I love that you all are doing that at X.AI in terms of saying, hey, from 10 to 2 p.m., this is when we need everyone, available for questions and things like that. But don't feel as if you have to work from 9 to 7 p.m.
Yeah, it's not about time put in; it's about output. It's when you're remote, you can't be looking over everyone's shoulders, making sure that they're showing up right at 9 a.m. and leaving right at 5 p.m. And that's it's more like, let's talk throughout the week about what we want to accomplish the following week. Have a morning, we call it a transparency meeting on Monday morning. And let's talk about what everyone wants to accomplish that week. And then by the end of the week, we have a demo day at 5 p.m. on Friday. I'm usually 2-3 beers deep at that point. So we're sort of looking back over what we accomplished that week, and it's almost like an agile cadence.
Yeah.
Just without the point system.
Yeah.
But again, you're not expected. There's no expectation that you're going to be sitting in front of your computer during a certain period of time and leaving after those hours. It's really just deliver what you said you would, and that's what teammates expect of you.
Man, that's so powerful, and it speaks to this power of holding your teammates accountable, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, because especially when you're in a remote workplace culture, it's like, how are we going to get things done if we don't hold each other accountable, right? Yeah. So I want to show love to our amazing audience that's tuning in right now. Shout out to RJ. Thanks so much for tuning in, RJ. He's saying, as someone who makes a business of merging these platforms into something easily accessed by consumers, how do you integrate the ones with different levels of latency? For example, instant messaging, Zoom, email, Slack.
By latency, I assume you mean just inherent latency in communication versus immediate face-to-face conversation, and not like internet lag.
I think so.
Okay. A lot of times what will happen is there will be a Slack thread going on and multiple people will be getting pinged, and it's, over the course of an hour or so, once a Slack thread grows to a certain length, you say, okay, let's jump off of this and let's jump onto a call and let's talk it through, because clearly there's too much going on. There's too many moving parts to this conversation for it to be just a linear conversation in Slack. But then what tends to happen is we'll post the meeting link publicly. Anyone who wants to jump on and be part of the conversation is welcome to. But then importantly, you have a little bit of a synopsis afterwards. So you'll have these Slack threads going, what about this? How about this? Blah, blah, blah. And then how about a call? And then a gap of 20 minutes. And then a synopsis, and now it's read over because we're going to summarize the call that we just had, but it's memorialized in line in Slack. But in things like that, sometimes those asynchronous tools just don't quite really get that interplay. And so, what we'll do frequently is we'll brainstorm over Zoom, or Google Meet, as the case may be, for an hour and just bounce ideas back and forth. And then we'll say, great, we've got a bunch of ideas, take it to a doc. And from there, we'll have a bunch of bullet points in a Google Doc. People will comment, they'll add to it. And that seems to work really well for us. It's a suitable substitute for the old whiteboard.
Yeah. No, that's powerful. So you're kind of speaking to this point of you now have to kind of have this clear dichotomy between asynchronous tools that you're using for certain specific types of work cases and versus synchronous tools that you can use more so for updates, status reports, and keeping, report alive. Yeah.
And we try to bias ourselves towards ad hoc video chats. Because, again, in a Slack thread, a lot of times, probably our most common comment in Slack is, "How about we just jump on a call?"
Right.
A lot of times for those types of things, you can't just say, "You know what? Let's schedule a call and let's get that on the calendar for later this week." It's like, no, let's in the context of this conversation in Slack, let's jump into a call. And we get work done.
Yeah. You all are pretty successful, right? So shout out to RJ, who's saying that that's a really intuitive solution. So he's appreciative of that crazy, awesome response that you just gave, man. Mike Musonza, thank you so much, Mike, for tuning in. Man, you are awesome. He's just loving our chat so far. I think he finds it hilarious. So we're making it his day.
Good.
So I wanna show love to Rubelin, who's saying, man, thank you so much for sharing all of your words of wisdom. And she's saying truth. So shout out to Rubelin for those comments. And so she's like totally tuned into what you're saying, man. So we have someone that's tuning in from Hell's Kitchen, New York City.
Hey.
They are asking you, what are the top 5 skills that are essential to an employee that are outside their job description that makes them stand out as a candidate?
As a candidate,
that's a powerful question, man.
Yeah, it is. The top skill that I look for in an employee is curiosity. I don't want someone who says, "Oh, I don't know how to do that. Someone else will have to do that." I want someone who's like, "Well, that sounds fascinating. I'm going to figure out how to do that."
Yeah.
So, someone who's incurious is pretty much a scratch from the get-go.
Yeah. I love that you say that, because that's actually something that we look for at Guide as well. What's curiosity-based thinking?
Yeah. And that's really what you need from a growth perspective is, I wonder what would happen if I touched this button.
Yeah.
Because you're pulling levers all day and trying to make a number move, and so you really got to throw things at the wall and see what sticks. But the top 5, so to summarize the question, the top 5 traits outside of work, right?
Yeah.
So humor is a big one. My sense of humor is pretty lame, and I get accused of bad puns and dad jokes all the time, which is not without merit. But it's like, don't take anything too seriously, even work, because in 10,000 years, none of this is going to matter. So let's just have some fun when we're doing it. So I think that sense of curiosity, a good sense of humor, and then a good sense of responsibility. So, someone who's really take things on themselves, and this isn't really a outside of work as much as an inside of work, but a sense of personal responsibility of like, look, if something doesn't get done, I'm more than capable of saying, my bad, that's on me. Let me work on that.
Ownership.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That's a much better term. Is ownership and just sort of a shamelessness about taking blame, or giving credit, and just saying, hey, look, like I know that I made a mistake, or I screwed something up, or something went sideways, but hey, that's part of life. That's part of living. That's part of learning. So let's keep going. And, and having the sort of, I guess self-confidence would be the right word, but the self-confidence to admit to a mistake and be like, yeah, let's keep going.
Yeah.
And then I think that what one little piece from outside of work is, especially for a remote company like us, when someone's applying for a job, it's really difficult to figure out, are they applying to this job because it's remote, or are they willing to be remote because it's this job? Trying to sort out, do they like me because
I love that,
or do they like me because of me, sort of thing. And so, we try to get at, is this person going to be someone who we can rely on to just go on autopilot and get things done because we can't look over your shoulder? And are they going to be a good addition to the team just from a culture standpoint?
Yeah, I love that. So curiosity, humor, ownership, and do they have the level of kind of like agency to be successful, in a remote work environment?
Yeah. Because there's, some people, they thrive in an office environment where they have, their peers kind of motivate them and keep them going. Other people can sit
It's true.
in front of a screen and be incredibly productive without anyone else around. So we kind of need someone who's a little bit somewhere in between, because they still need to interact and stay abreast of the team. They also have to have that degree of autonomy that comes with remote work, which I think everyone is figuring out now.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned this, Ammon, because I think it's a matter of one, instilling that ownership mindset, but also looking to have people join a company, a team, people who are creators, right? Because like if you love the work, if you're joining, and hopefully you're in the right role, because I think that's often where a lot of companies fall short of, is they don't know how to map the skill to the role. They don't understand that, like, look, people are going to be fulfilled if you give them the right role, the right type of work, and you give them the space to craft it. And I think what's so interesting about what you say is just the fact that I found that people are more successful working remote when you give them work, and more importantly, that work matches their strengths. Yep. And what they love doing, right? And they love creating too, right? So it's like you want people with that level of passion.
Yeah, you do. And you want people that are also unafraid of asking for help. But not the kind of help which is, do this for me. It's more the kind of help of, hey, show me how to do this. I had years ago, I had a couple of employees who were just polar opposites. One was, I don't know how to do that. Can you help me do it? And then the next time I need to do it, can you help me do it again? Who's just saying, I have no idea how to do that, but I'm gonna learn, and I'm gonna ask you for help along the way, but I'm gonna learn it.
Yeah.
2-3 months down the road, I'm still sort of hand holding one while the other one is just, I could have been reporting to her by that point.
Ruthless curiosity, man.
I'm good with it. That's also, you made the point about matching a skill to a job.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can match a person to a job, skills be damned, because you can just trust them to go pick up the skill. It's probably slower than bringing in someone who already is adept at, say, I keep using SQL as an example, but writing SQL queries. But if you find the right person who has that curiosity and that aptitude for learning, they're going to pick it up as they go, and they can just become that sort of Swiss Army knife otherwise, where they can pick up all sorts of other skills along the way.
Yeah. Because you kind of you position yourselves as the Swiss Army knife guy for marketing and growth, right? I love it because but I love it because similar to you, I'm a generalist, but I'm also really a specialist too, right? Like we can kind of like do both, right? And when we talk about the future of work and the type of skills necessary, and shout out to Ferry, I am going to make sure that we address your questions, but I want to ask Ammon this lovely question real quick. I kind of think that we definitely are going to need people who are T-shaped. They can broad-based thinking, but still be able to go specific on a niche like marketing, product, engineering, things like that. How can us as employees, creators, workers find that balance between not being too much of a generalist, but still being able to kind of have that focused niche?
I think of that the vertical portion of that T, when you're T-shaped, is somewhat fluid. Like at my previous job, I was, very broad based in a lot of things, but I was very deep in paid acquisition, SEO, and those sorts of things. I touched a lot of product and other things, but it was largely paid acquisition. And at this current job, the vertical portion of the support beam of my T, let's go with that. Much deeper into product and into product design and content and things like that. And so, you sort of build that depth to suit the situation in which you find yourself. And yes, it's good to build a very strong skill set, very deep, but that can still pigeonhole you into certain types of positions. And if you're okay with that, great. If you want to be, the acquisition guy for your whole career, but I find it more fun to challenge myself and take on positions where I need to develop a sturdy trunk for my tea tree. Ooh, nailed it.
So you think it's all a matter of developing that sturdy trunk to keep the tree alive?
Well, developing that sturdy trunk, but understanding that you can develop multiple trunks and let one atrophy. Well, not atrophy, but you're going to be. I'm just beating this metaphor to death right now, aren't I?
Yeah, no, but it's a good metaphor, actually.
But the point is that depending on what you're doing and what the demands of any given job are, you should be comfortable putting down different routes as needed. So right now we don't have a lot of paid acquisition in market. We don't need a lot of paid acquisition. Our acquisition channel is primarily through the product.
Yeah, product-led growth.
Yeah, it's product-led growth. And so, as a growth person, previously it was all acquisition, marketing, and activation. And now it's very much product hooks, product, customer delight, and those sorts of things. And so, the base part of my T is just different. It's there. It's just different.
Yeah. So shout out to Ammon, who's saying that you all have to develop that trunk in order to keep your T-shaped skills alive, because it's okay to be a generalist, because that broad-based knowledge really does help you with being able to talk to multiple different types of stakeholders, people. But also you have to develop like a very specific niche as well and position yourself as that, because that may allow you to be more employable. So shout out to you for that, man. Very saying, how do you measure that productivity even when no one is around, quote unquote?
How do you measure productivity when others aren't around? Well, there's certain things where, there's days where I go, oh man, I haven't checked in on Slack. Everybody must think that I'm slacking. Hey. And then there's other days where I'm constantly posting things like, hey, I just tweeted this. I just sent this out. Hey, I have this idea. Here's a proposal for a new product feature, these sorts of things. And I feel hyper productive. But when you average all of that out, I think that, I mentioned earlier, our sort of agile cadence for our entire company is on Monday mornings, we set expectations, set goals, and decide what projects we're going to take on. And then on Friday, we demo those projects. And so there's sort of a built-in accountability to that sort of cadence. And I might be able to get all my work done in, 3 hours on a Tuesday afternoon. If so, good for me. And I should probably take on more projects. But as long as I deliver what I promised my team I would deliver, we're all good. And we're not looking over each other's shoulders to make sure that you're being productive and that you're putting in the hours. It's more about, are you shipping what you promised to ship, while at the same time managing all the things that come up throughout the week in a timely fashion.
And also, I think what's so powerful about what you're saying, and it goes back to accountability, man. And also, if things slip, why? Right? Because things do happen, right? There's always realities or things that are unexpected, right? And I think also having that transparency within your team to say, like, all we really care about at the end of the day is outcomes, right? Like, it's not a matter of inputs, like you said, right, Ammon? It's a matter of the outcomes that we're creating together, and how can we support each other to create the outcomes necessary.
Well, and that also comes back to accountability and ownership. I'll give you a very salient example. Last week, I said, well, I'm going to write this blog post about, how X.AI is a suitable replacement for Assistant.to, which just, I believe, got sunset by Cirrus Insight. And I haven't, right now I'm talking to you instead of doing final edits, and that's fine. I told the team, hey, I promised I'd deliver this by Friday. Didn't get there. That's on me. We're going to ship this as soon as we can next week. So there's certain things that, you may not hit the goal that you set out to do, but that's okay. And everyone needs to understand that's okay. I think that this actually works better when you're a small team, but it still translates to larger companies, larger teams, which is just say what you're going to do what you said you would do. And if you don't, then make it right.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. So let me talk to you about, what are some of the trends that you're seeing right now in SaaS in terms of, rising or emerging tech that you think is interesting, or, companies who you believe are going to be leading their domain in a few years. Let's talk SaaS.
SaaS. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of Slack clones out there being built by companies large and small.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
e-
true.
Everyone's trying to build a Slack clone to try to keep you inside their walled garden
Yeah.
without having to pay the price tag to acquire Slack. Uh, I think that the companies that are more interconnected with others are going to win.
Mm,
So it's not necessarily about breaking walled gardens down, breaking down the walls around a garden. It's more about being able to access it from your own. So having a good integration with Slack, having a good
yeah.
integration with Zoom, having a good integration with Microsoft Teams, Amazon Chime, like on and on and on. So that the companies that allow themselves to be interoperable with whatever technology stack you've chosen are the ones that are going to win. But also just, you know, SaaS has gotten pretty cheap to build these days.
Yeah.
The tools are out there. You can make a boilerplate SaaS in no time flat. It's really about making sure that you're solving an actual salient problem and that you can
Yeah.
communicate it in a way that people recognize, oh, I do have that problem that you're solving, and I see that you are solving that. I will go ahead and purchase that for $8 per month.
All right.
That's the goal. And it's much more difficult, I think, to communicate the value of software now than it is to build it.
Mm.
Not to diminish the work of building software, but there's so many tools out there that make it fast and easy that the ones that communicate well are the ones that win.
Yeah, no. So interoperability is really important, and really thinking about how do you not create a walled garden, but more so a welcoming garden that people can come in and out of, and have a piece of the pie, right?
Well, just recognize that all the big companies of the world, they're creating their own walled gardens. That's what they need to do to make sure that you can't leave their ecosystem.
Mm.
But the smaller companies just need to understand that they have to work across a lot of those other ecosystems.
Yeah.
And I think that makes the most sense. You're not going to be able to create your own walled garden. Very few companies have the user base and the revenues to be able to build every tool that every team needs
Yeah.
in short order.
Yeah, and once in recent news too, what's really been fascinating to me is how Facebook, someone that's on the consumer end, I mean, they have Workplace from a enterprise SaaS perspective, but they literally have kind of, embraced and learned from what Zoom and House Party were able to, find success in, or Zoom Zoom isn't even a consumer company, it's a SaaS company, but Facebook was able to learn and be like, oh wait, people like that. Let's go ahead and adapt that to our product so we can keep them within our walled garden. But they even went a step further and said, oh, you know what? We'll also make it super accessible for 50 people to do video conferencing who may not even be on Facebook. So now they're trying to be a little bit, more open. And I think it goes to your point of, like, I think the most successful and innovative companies in SaaS, but just in tech in general, are going to think interoperability first, and are going to think about how do we integrate and really truly build a community, whether we're in SaaS or we're in consumer.
Yeah, and meeting the consumer where they are. Facebook said, "Oh, there's a need for video conferencing. There's a need for, Workplace it's a pretty good product." And they said, "Look, everyone already has a Facebook login. This makes it good. Put this product out there, and people are basically defaulted into it, which is essentially what Google Meet is as well.
Yeah.
You're on Google Apps now. You have Google Meet. Well, you just kind of de facto use that now.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant strategy, and we're capitalizing by integrating with all these tools." But yeah, I think that's a pretty important strategy, is to recognize that people are not going to drop all the tools that they're using to come use yours. Yours meet them there.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. And shout out to Ferry, who says outcome over output. Preach, 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 preach. Shout out to Raquel for tuning in as well. If you have any questions for Ammon or I, please let us know in the comments. We'll love to answer them. And shout out to everyone that's tuning in across Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. We appreciate you and your Ammon, I would love to kind of have you. What are your parting words for those who either want to become a growth leader, such as yourself, or are really interested in what's going on in terms of SaaS and productivity right now?
I have no idea when I became a growth leader. I still don't consider myself that. I guess I've picked up enough tricks along the way to be able to dispense some wisdom, and I hope it's useful. I think, again, I would take it back to how I try to hire, which is look for that curiosity and look for opportunities to be curious and learn more yourself. Say, I'm going to build a personal website and I want it to do XYZ. So I'm going to go Google it and figure out and then steal some code from Stack Overflow and make it do what I want it to do. Well, boom, you just learned JavaScript. You might not know it, but you did.
Wow.
And so, maintaining that curiosity and finding a problem to solve. Go build your personal website. Realize that you want a transparent background for an image. Fire up Photoshop. Figure out how to do it. Boom, you've got a new skill. So sort of just managing those skills that you can bring to bear on any company and that you can put in that sort of tag soup at the end of your LinkedIn profile is really important. As far as following SaaS and the SaaS world, subscribe to Beta List, subscribe to Crunchbase, subscribe to AngelList alerts and all these sorts of things. Keep tabs on the world through that. Sign up for free trials, sign up for free software. The news that you're going to get is a barrage of emails, some of which will come from me. Sorry.
Most of which come from you.
Yeah, that's part of what I do. They abate after the first week or so. Don't worry. But kick the tires on things. As you use more and more SaaS platforms, you start understanding what works and what doesn't, what UX patterns make sense to intuitively and which ones don't. Yeah. I can tell you a couple of points at which I feel like our UX needs improvement and a couple of points at which it just makes sense. And over time, over a lot of time using a lot of software products, you start to just get an intuitive sense for how they should be built. And there's certain patterns that just work.
Yeah. That's powerful, man. So shout out to RJ who's asking us, why do you think that a company like Apple that is so standoffish when it comes to their proprietary hardware and software does so well? Can it be enough to be accessible even if there's no goodwill there? What are your thoughts on this? I actually have some thoughts on this.
Apple's walled garden is Apple's walled garden, and it's a vertical urban garden, I guess I would say. I think that they can be very successful because they own the desktop, they own your pocket, and they own all the software stack in between. With that said, they're not,
and they own the marketplace,
and they own the marketplace and the supply chain, and
right.
Back in the day when the iPod was, I'm showing my age. Back in the day when the iPod was a thing, you couldn't get the little hard drives that they were using. I think it was 1.25 inch hard drives because they were buying all of them in the world. But that doesn't mean that you can't get within Apple's walled garden. You can still build apps that interoperate with their systems. You got to play by their rules, but you can certainly build your own tendrils into their walled garden that do play by their rules. You can build your app. You can have it integrate with iMessage and those sorts of things. You just have to play by the different sets of rules that are laid out by the different companies that you want to work with, and that's fine.
Yeah,
no,
that's so true.
Hear your thoughts on it too, Tim.
Yeah, I 100%. So a lot of people see Apple as like this really gated walled garden. They actually don't have a walled garden. They actually have a very open ecosystem in a sense, but they just are amazing at vertical and holistic integration across multiple channels. So when I think about RJ, when I think about Apple, for them, they're principled on like their values, which is premium quality, software and hardware. So just not software, is software and hardware. And what's made Apple so successful is the fact that they've literally lived by those core product principles since Steve Jobs created Apple, right? Like it's never been a matter of selling low. They're not like the cost cutter. They're not the low cost alternative. all about quality and premiumness. And they're very guarded with their technology. That's all proprietary. But when I think about their ecosystem, from software and hardware, to a degree, they actually do play nice from a software standpoint and in the marketplace offerings. And you can even look at some of their custom products and apps. A lot of people don't use them, but the fact that they have the App Store makes everything much more bearable, right? For us as Apple users. And I think as we move on, I think in this new era too, they're going to have to find ways to start partnering. Right, they're already partnering with banks on the credit card, right? Like there's all kinds of things that they're starting to realize. Well, if we want to be a successful subscription-based business, we're actually going to have to find ways to still partner and be successful, and at the same time reach our end consumer, but still provide a quality experience. So I actually think that although, like, based off a principle standpoint, Apple is still the best at integration from software and hardware, I actually think they're actually loosening the reins on their walled garden. And this is, a lot of pundits would agree with me, but you're starting to see it little by little. And, think about what the AR and VR world is going to look like. RJ, like they're going to have to, that's not going to be a winners take all market, in my opinion. I think you're going to see a lot of collaboration in terms of software and hardware. And I'm pretty much excited about it.
Yeah. And I would add to that, Apple, like a lot of these big companies, they're really a platform, a platform for delivery of services and products and those sorts of things. A platform for apps, a platform for payment systems.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that when they try to create these walled gardens, Apple has the Swift programming language for building apps, but there's always going to be an appetite for cross-platform solutions like React Native that can build apps for Apple and Android. And so as much as they want to just create systems that are languages that only work on their own platform, like Apple Maps, some people want to use Google Maps, and Google Maps is always going to operate on that platform. As long as there's an appetite from people who want to be able to interoperate with multiple platforms, it's going to be impossible to have a platform strategy but still be a walled garden.
Yeah,
which is fine with me as someone who's trying to interoperate with as many platforms
to grow. So shout out to you for that, Ammon. Yeah. So RJ, great question, man. I love that question. And with that said, thank you so much for joining us on the Unleashing the Future of Work live online podcast. I want to show love to the amazing people who have been tuning in for this awesome episode with Ammon. He is awesome. What do you guys think? I'm sure you guys love him. Make sure that you follow him on LinkedIn. He's super active on LinkedIn. Where else are you active on?
Comparatively, not so. I would say primarily LinkedIn. I'm really not all that active on most social media. My Twitter is pretty much a dead zone. And most of what I post on LinkedIn is work related, which is what LinkedIn is for. Feel free to follow me. You can also follow Dennis, our CEO. He's actually extremely active on LinkedIn and has a substantial following. Always has.
He does.
Usually when I have something to post work related on LinkedIn, I send it to Dennis because he's got a much bigger audience.
Dennis is definitely active, and he's actually going to be on a future episode of Unleashing the Future of Work. So you all are going to get to talk with him. It's the X.AI family is awesome.
He's smarter, funnier, and more handsome than me. So it's going to be so much better than this. So much better.
Sweet. With that said, make sure if you're interested in sponsoring or being a guest on the Unleashing the Future of Work live podcast, check out UTFOWlive.com, UTFOW.com if you want to sponsor or guest. And check out the breakintobigtech.com course that I'm doing with my great buddy John at Amazon. We help you get into tech and understand how SaaS works. But more importantly, how do you communicate your transferable skills to a tech job? With that said, you all, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode with my buddy Ammon Brown. Shout out to Ammon for all of the great work he's doing. With that said, peace, love, and talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.
Thanks, Tim.